Across the wide silver gulf of space, a quiet tremor moved through the ancient lanes, where many worlds had once traded songs and metals and hopes and warnings as the long age of peace. It gave way to an age of careful watching, for the sky had begun to whisper of a new people who crossed the dark with stubborn fire and with vessels built not for grace, but for survival, and these people were called humans. On the council world of Vela, a ring of delegates gathered in a hall grown from living crystal, and among them stood beings of fur-scale light and mist, yet none of them could quite understand the reports sent by far-out scouts, who spoke of human ships that took damage and kept moving, of human crews that faced vacuum and still fought on, of human minds that refused to accept loss as a final answer. Aaron, who served as a record-keeper for the council, listened as the elders spoke with uneasy tones, and while Aaron had never seen a human, he felt a strange pull in the stories, as if the galaxy itself leaned closer whenever their name was spoken. The scouts said that humans came from a small blue world that had no right to produce such fierce travelers, yet they had done so by will and by need, for their home had been fragile, and their history had been filled with storms and wars and long nights of fear, and so they had learned early to hold on to each other and to push back against the dark eye. A young envoy who stood near Aaron whispered that if even half the stories were true, then the humans would change everything, and Aaron nodded, for he could feel the truth of that in his bones. The council decided to send a single ship to meet the humans, not as a threat, but as a test, and it was named Dawnpath, and its crew was chosen from many worlds, with Aaron as its chronicler, for the story of first contact would need to be kept with care. Dawnpath moved out from Vela with silent grace and traveled toward the region where the human fleet had last been seen. And along the way, the crew shared tales of their own homes, as if trying to remind themselves what they were risking by stepping into the unknown. When the human ship finally appeared, it was not sleek or elegant, but it was powerful in a way that felt like a clenched fist, and its hull bore marks of past battles, yet it still moved with steady purpose. Two vessels drifted closer, and a channel was opened, and a human voice came through, calm and clear, as it offered greetings in a dozen learned tongues, until one of them matched the language of the Dawn Path. The human speaker called himself Leo and said that his people came in peace, though they would not bow to fear, and Aaron felt a thrill at the simple honesty in those words. A meeting was arranged, and Leo stepped aboard the Dawn Path wearing a suit of dark fiber and a small badge that showed a blue world under a rising sun, and he moved with a quiet confidence that made even the tallest of the crew take notice. Loma, a diplomat from a water world, welcomed him, and soon they were seated in a chamber where light flowed like liquid around them, and questions were asked and answered. Leo spoke of humanity as a patchwork of cultures bound by a shared will to endure and to explore, and he told of how they had faced extinction more than once, and had learned that hope was not a gift, but a choice made again. And again the crew of the Dawn Path listened, and some felt fear, while others felt wonder, for here was a people who had stared into the void and had decided to build bridges rather than walls. As the talks went on, a warning came from the outer sensors, for a raider fleet had entered the system, drawn by the promise of new prey, and their ships were swift and cruel. The Dawnpath was not built for heavy combat, and the human vessel was outnumbered, yet Leo did not hesitate as he called his crew and began to coordinate a defense. In watched as human tactics unfolded with daring and precision as their ships used the field of drifting ice and debris to hide and strike, and even when one of their engines was hit, they kept fighting with a fierce refusal to yield. The raiders were taken by surprise, for they had never faced an enemy that would push forward even while bleeding, and soon their formation broke, and they fled back into the dark one. The battle was over. The Dawn Path it suffered damage, but no lives were lost, and the human ship, though scarred, still stood ready and proud in the quiet that followed. Leo returned to the council chamber, and there was a new respect in the eyes of every being present. Loma spoke first, saying that the courage of humanity had been proven not by their words but by their actions, and that the council would be honored to call them Alislaio smiled and said that humans had always believed that true strength was found in standing together, and Aaron felt that this moment would echo across history. The Dawn Path returned to Vela with the human ship beside it, and When they arrived, the great hall filled with light and sound as the council gathered to welcome their new friend Sarin, recorded every detail, knowing that this was not just the meeting of two peoples, but the beginning of a new chapter for the galaxy in. The days that followed, humans shared their knowledge of engineering, medicine, and art, and in return they learned of worlds beyond their own wildest dreams. Some were surprised by the human love of stories and music and laughter, even in the face of hardship, and others were moved by their deep loyalty to one another. Kai spent long hours speaking with human explorers who told of distant stars and lost colonies, and the hope that drove them to keep searching for a place where all could thrive in. Wrote of these exchanges with care, for he saw how quickly trust was growing and how fear was slowly giving way to a shared sense of purpose. Yet not all were pleased by the arrival of humans, for some ancient powers saw them as a threat to the old balance, and whispers of conflict began to stir. One such power was a shadowed league that had long controlled trade routes through fear and force, and they viewed the bold spirit of humanity as a danger to their rule. They sent envoys bearing false smiles and hidden blades to test the resolve of the new alliance, but humans were not easily fooled. Leo and his people met these challenges with calm and clarity, and when deception was revealed, they did not lash out in anger, but stood firm in their demand for fairness. This quiet strength unsettled their foes and inspired their friends, and soon more worlds began to seek out human contact, hoping to share in their resilience. Aaron watched as the network of alliances grew, weaving a tapestry of cooperation that spanned systems and cultures, and he knew that the galaxy was being reshaped by a simple truth that humans carried with them. They believed that no matter how dark the night, dawn would come if one had the will to see it in a small garden on Vela. Aaron and Leo walked among glowing flowers and spoke of what lay ahead, and Leo said that humanity did not seek to rule but to belong. Aaron replied that in a universe so vast, belonging was perhaps the greatest gift of Allah's years past. The stories of human bravery spread, and children on distant worlds grew up dreaming of stars not as cold and distant lights, but as places where friends might be found. The raiders who once terrorized the lanes found fewer places to hide, and many chose peace over endless war, inspired by the example of those who had faced them without surrendering, and continued to write, filling volumes with tales of shared triumphs and quiet moments of understanding. And he often thought back to the first reports that had reached the council, filled with fear and doubt. Now those fears seemed small compared to the vast future that had opened, because a single people had dared to step beyond their home and say that they were ready to meet the unknown. Humans had arrived not as conquerors but as companions, and in doing so they had reminded the galaxy of something it had nearly forgotten, that even in a universe of endless stars, the greatest light came from the hearts of those who refused to give up.